All right, everyone, I think we're live. Zillow just updated their 2026 home price forecast, and I have to show you this update in this video, everyone, because if you're a home buyer investor, you're going to want to understand the cities that Zillow is forecasting to have the biggest declines and the biggest increases. But first, I want to talk about some states that could be tilting from a correction to a crash here in late 2025. The home values are dropping already by a lot in certain states and cities. Let's get into this data and look at where prices are down the most in the last 12 months, according to data from Zillow, which you can see here on Reventure App. And we're going to start with Florida, everyone. In Florida, prices are down 5.1% in the last 12 months. However, we have some cities in Florida that are down double digits in the last 12 months. So for anyone who's saying there is no home price correction, for anyone who's saying that prices aren't going down, they're wrong. They are going down in a lot of different cities and states in the U.S. And if we're seeing double-digit declines year over year, like in Punta Gorda and Cape Coral, that's indicative of a crash taking place. Now, if we zoom out here on this map on Reventure App, you can see it's the areas in blue where home values are already going down the most. So values are already dropping all across Florida. They're already dropping all across Texas. They're already dropping all across Northern California, and they're now even dropping in Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, parts of South Carolina, and Arizona and Colorado. And here's the stats, everyone. Over the last year, home prices are down in 15 different states and areas, which you can see on this list. So we already have price declines in 15 different states and areas in the last year. Florida, DC, Arizona, Hawaii, interestingly, Texas, Georgia, Vermont, Colorado, California is where values are already dropping year over year. But what's even more interesting is month over month, values in August dropped in 24 out of 50 states. 24 out of 50 states saw a decline in August. So half the states in America are already experiencing value declines. The question is, when are these value declines going to accelerate into a crash, and are we already seeing that play out in certain areas? Well, folks, I want to show you some listings here that I found on Zillow of sellers doing big price cuts. We're seeing more sellers do big price cuts in certain markets, and for sure, this is not happening in every market. This is not happening in every neighborhood. But, folks, I've just been finding more and more houses like this one. Tell me what you guys think of this house in Dallas. Do you think this is a fair enough price cut? It's a 5-bed, 3-bath on the market for $395,000 or $188 a foot. Now take a look at what this house was listed at a couple years ago. $650,000 list price in 2023. It's been on the market for over 2 years. Now they've cut it to $395,000. So we have a seller here doing a $240,000 price cut south of Dallas. The house is still sitting. Is it enough to sell? We'll have to see. What about in North Venice, Florida? This is on the west coast of Florida. This is a house that's currently pending. Take a look at how much the seller has cut the price on this house, everyone. It's currently pending. It's currently under contract, but this is a mammoth price cut. They originally listed for $589,000 in 2024. $589,000 in 2024 was the original list price. Now it's under contract for $399,000. So they've cut the price $180,000, $190,000, almost a 30% reduction. And why I'm showing you this data is so you all understand that in the hard-hit markets, values are dropping. Prices are going down a lot, actually, in certain neighborhoods. And this downturn is being led by two particular parties. There's two particular types of homeowners in America that are causing values to go down more. And if you're a home buyer wanting a deal right now, you could look to these two areas to find a deal. One is home builders. Home builders are doing mammoth price cuts. We talked about how Lennar, the second biggest builder in America, has cut prices 22%. But the other is investors, everyone. A lot of investors are now heading for the exits of the housing market, and they are listing their homes and often taking big losses on their homes because they can't make money on the houses anymore as rentals. The property taxes have gone up. The insurance has gone up. They're having to refi maybe maybe their short-term mortgage, they can't afford the interest anymore. We're seeing some distress, some pressure to sell coming from the investors, which is driving down Zillow's home value estimates in certain cities and neighborhoods and is now influencing their forecast in the future. And as this video goes along, I'm going to get into more analysis on where prices are dropping the most already and where they're forecast to drop most. But first, I actually want to reveal something kind of interesting about the housing market right now that not a lot of people know. It's actually something that's never happened before in U.S. history. We've never seen this happen before. Not even in 2008 did we see this happen. And this has to do with the difference between the cost of buying a house from an existing homeowner. You know, if you go and you look at an open house from someone who already lives in the house versus a builder. There's something happening right now with this price action that's never happened before in U.S. history, and it speaks to where the market's going. So we have two lines on this graph. Very important for you all to understand as a home buyer investor what's going on. The orange line is the cost of new homes, builder homes in America. The yellow line is the cost of existing homes. And what do you see is that for, I don't know, a good 25 years, the cost of buying a new home from a builder was more than the cost of buying an existing resale home. Right? And it makes sense. Like a brand new home should cost more than an existing home. But then something interesting has happened in the last 3 months, everyone. What do you notice is that the cost of builder homes is now less than the cost of existing homes. You can see here that the cost of buying an existing home in July 2025 was $422,000, while the cost of buying a new home from a builder was $404,000, meaning that it was 4.4% cheaper to buy a house from a builder than an existing owner. We've literally never seen before in U.S. housing market history this situation where new homes are cheaper than existing homes by this much on a back-to-back basis. Now, I know what some of you are going to say in the comments section. Some of you are going to say, well, maybe that has to do with the fact that builders don't build good quality. Maybe that has to do with the fact that builder homes are usually out in rural areas. And that's true. Builder homes are out in rural areas, and maybe sometimes the quality isn't the best. However, the fact that builder homes are now cheaper than existing homes tells you that something big is happening in this housing market, that actually the cost to buy land and then build on that land is cheaper than the cost to buy a home that's been built for 20 years. What does that tell you? That tells you that existing homeowners have been slower to react to this housing market downturn. That actually there isn't the type of inflation that people talk about in the housing market. It doesn't really exist. And the builders are showing you that. They're cutting prices, they're compressing margins, they're giving deals, they're giving discounts. And the existing home sellers haven't quite caught on as much. But I think the market will continue to trend towards what the builders are doing. And the reason is, folks, is because it's just too expensive to buy a house today. Even with these initial declines we're seeing in prices that I showed you in the beginning, in the 15 states year over year, and the 24 states month over month, and we're going to get into the forecasts. But even with those initial declines in prices, it's too expensive. And do you know how I know that it's too expensive? And how you can know that it's too expensive, and how you can actually know how much money you need to make to buy a house? Is use the calculator I'm about to show you in the next screen. And I built this calculator to help you guys actually. And I asked the question, how much money do you need to make to buy a $400,000 house? How much money do you need to make to buy a $400,000 house? I want you guys to think about that. How much money do you think you have to make per year to afford to buy a $400,000 house, which is close to the average house in America? Well, I'm going to show you the answer to that question, everyone, because it reveals a lot about what's going on in the housing market. I made this calculator in Microsoft Excel. We're going to maybe release something like this on Reventure App soon, but I want to show you the math here and how scary this is for the housing market right now, why the prices are starting to drop and need to drop by more. If you buy a house for $400,000 at today's 6.37% mortgage rate, and you put 15% down, that's a $340,000 mortgage. Now, that's $2,100 a month in interest and principal that you would be paying. On top of that, you'd probably be paying $417 a month in property taxes. On top of that, you'd probably be paying $170 a month in property insurance. What is that overall? $2,700 a month all-in monthly payment to buy a $400,000 house on average across the U.S., assuming the average property tax and insurance rates. Now, you guys can let me know what your budget is. Is it above $2,700? Is it below $2,700? I think a lot of people are going to have trouble affording $2,700. That's an annual payment of $32,000 a month, right? Annual payment of $32,000 a month. Assuming you don't want to go over the 30% cost threshold, right? Not spend more than 30% on your mortgage payments. You need to make $108,000 to buy a $400,000 house in September 2025. And this right here is the overall problem with the housing market, everyone, because the median income in America is $84,000. The median income is $84,000, but you have to make $108,000 to buy a house with a mortgage for $400,000. And this is where the math just breaks down. This is where it all makes sense in terms of why buyer demand is so low and why home sales are so low. Mortgage applications today just came in for the end of September. Mortgage applications are 35% below 2019 levels. Why are mortgage applications slow? It's because home buyers can't afford it. And the reason this is important to understand, everyone, is to lay down the foundation of what's going on in the housing market. There's a buyer strike going on right now. People either can't afford it, can't qualify, or if they can, they think that it's just not a good deal. They look at the prices and they say, I'm not going to do it. And so long as that buyer strike is happening, demand will stay low. Inventory will continue to increase, and we're going to see more price declines. We're likely to see price declines spread to more areas. And with that, let's get into actually some specific area forecasts, everyone, because I know a lot of you out there, you've already been submitting a lot of requests here in the chat. And we actually have one deep dive request already coming in on the super chat. And this is an interesting one, everyone. It is someone from Florida. It's someone named Rodman. Rodman from Florida wants a deep review on Boca Raton, or is it Boca Raton? Boca Raton, Florida, 33486. 33486. Now, folks, do you think prices in Boca Raton, which is in South Florida, do you think they're up? Do you think they're down over the last year? Let's see. What's the Zillow Value Index saying for this area? You could see it on Reventure App. Well, folks, take a look at this. Values are down 5.5% already in Boca Raton, 33486. We already have 5.5% decline. The Reventure App forecast is minus 2.2% for the next 12 months. So interestingly, our forecast isn't as aggressive in terms of our downward price forecast. I wonder why. I think it probably has to do with inventory. The inventory in this area, Rodman, you could see, is still below pre-pandemic levels. So we do think there's going to be continued downward pressure. It's already getting cheaper by 5.5%. You should still be able to negotiate discounts. Don't expect a crash in this zip code, though, in the next 12 months. What other areas would you guys want me to look at? Oh, interesting. We have some people calling BS. Let's see. Bo says he calls BS. He thinks 30% is too much to spend of your gross income on your mortgage payment. A lot of people still fail at 25. I think your numbers are way too lenient. Now, this is a great point, everyone. How much would you feel comfortable spending of your income on your mortgage, tax, and insurance payment, of your gross before tax income? What percent would you feel comfortable spending on your mortgage payment? Let me know here in the chat. You know, I personally kind of agree with you, Bo. I think 30% is kind of high, right? You know, we talked about 30%. You know, if we did 25%, say you didn't want to spend more than 25%, you got to make $130,000 to buy that 40%, to buy that $400,000 house. And so, you know, a lot of people got, unfortunately, kind of tricked into buying homes during the pandemic in the last couple of years at peak prices. A lot of people got tricked. And I think you're right, Bo. I think probably 30% is a little high. You probably want to be closer to that 25% level. Another point from Mark is also a great one. He says, first of all, not a lot of people have $60,000 for a down payment. Let's not forget that point either. Why is home buyer demand so low right now? Well, okay, I can't afford the mortgage. I can't afford the tax and insurance, but yes, I might not have $60,000 for a down payment. That's also a great point. We have a request now coming in for a zip code in Arkansas, everyone. Now, have you guys ever been to Arkansas? I've been to Arkansas once. I drove through it a couple times, and I stayed in Bentonville overnight once. Bentonville is where Walmart's headquarters is. Let's see. Mr. Bamboo wants to know 72715 in Bella Vista, Arkansas. Bella Vista kind of sounds fancy. I don't know if Arkansas has many fancy places. Let's see, 72715. I actually kind of like Arkansas as a market to buy in. I think it's like one of the better ones. If you had to buy right now, you can see Bella Vista is actually north of Bentonville. So check this out, everyone. Bentonville is here. And I think all of you should maybe just get this geography lesson on Arkansas, because I think a lot of people overlook Arkansas and they say to themselves, what's in Arkansas? Well, you got Little Rock here in the middle of the state, right? And Arkansas is between Tennessee and Oklahoma, basically. And you got Little Rock in the middle of the state. But you got Bentonville and Fayetteville in the northwest, and this is actually a higher income area. Bentonville prices are up 5.7% in the last 12 months, everyone. So Walmart seems to be doing well. Their corporate employees seem to be doing well. Prices in Bella Vista are up 2.5%. So we have prices going up in northwest Arkansas. What about in the next 12 months? What do we think is going to happen? Well, I think it might change in the next 12 months. We now have a minus 4.6% downward forecast. Minus 4.6% downward forecast of Reventure App in Bella Vista, Arkansas, north of Bentonville. Why? Well, folks, it's going to be an inventory story, I think. Look at this. We had 150 homes for sale last year in August 2024. Now we have 232 homes for sale. Look at that increase in inventory year over year. What is that, folks? That's a 60% increase in inventory. When you see that 60% increase in inventory, that's telling you more sellers that are desperate, more homes on the market, the demand's not holding up, and ultimately that's good news for you as a buyer. So let's just be clear about this, everyone. When I talk about a negative forecast, when I talk about, prices are going to go from being positive to negative in your zip code, that's good news for you. If you've been waiting to buy as a home buyer investor, you're going to want to see more inventory. You're going to want to see more price cuts. You're going to want to see more days on the market. You're going to like when Reventure's forecast goes into negative territory, because that means that it's becoming more favorable for you to buy in that market. And I actually did some really interesting research, and I'm going to reveal to you in a second. I kind of, cracked the code on why certain areas in the housing market are going down and other areas in the housing market are going up. And I'm going to show you that data in a second, because there's one data point that kind of explains it all. And I think you guys really need to know about it. But first, I want to talk about Zillow. Zillow's forecast. We've been talking about what Zillow has been showing for values the last 12 months, but what's Zillow forecasting in the future? Well, Zillow's forecast has changed lately, everyone. A couple months ago, Zillow was forecasting prices were going to go down 1.7% on a national basis. This was March, April, May. Now Zillow has upwardly revised their forecast, and Zillow now thinks prices are going to go up 1.2% over the next 12 months on a national basis. This is really interesting. What is Zillow up to? Why is Zillow increasing their forecast? You can see here, I downloaded it for you guys here in Microsoft Excel. Zillow is showing the US at plus 1.2% through August 2026. So Zillow went from having a moderate negative forecast to now a moderate positive forecast. What is Zillow up to? Why do they think prices are going to now go up over the next 12 months? Let's take a look. Well, they have some variations actually by city. So Zillow thinks values are going to go down in Dallas and Houston and DC and San Francisco and Minneapolis. Zillow thinks values are going to go down. Interestingly, Zillow thinks values are going to go up in Philadelphia and Miami. Zillow thinks values are going to go up 1.5% over the next 12 months in Miami. Ooh. Folks, I think Zillow has some great people working in their economics department. I think they put out great data on the housing market. I think it's really a net positive what they do for understanding the housing market. But I'm going to challenge them a bit on this Miami plus 1.5% forecast. Is that actually going to happen? Are prices in Miami actually going to go up 1.5% over the next 12 months? I mean, what's going on in Miami's market right now, everyone? Well, Miami, by Zillow's own data, is down 4.2% in the last 12 months. So Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach is already going down 4.2%. What's the Reventure forecast? Well, Reventure is forecasting another minus 4.2%. So Reventure, this is so interesting, everyone. Reventure is minus 4.2 in Miami. Zillow is plus 1.5. So clearly we have some disagreements on different markets overall. Reventure, we also still have a negative forecast on a national basis. Our forecast on a national basis, everyone, I'm going to show it to you right here. Our national forecast is minus 1.3%. So we have a minus 1.3% national forecast in the next 12 months. Zillow is at plus 1.2. So we're more conservative than Zillow. We think prices are going to drop nationally, and we have some big disagreements city by city, market by market. I would eventually love to have someone from Zillow on the channel. Maybe we could talk about these forecasts and talk about where they're getting some of these numbers. Ultimately, what Zillow is doing, they're seeing a slowdown in some of the sellers coming to market in recent months. Some sellers are getting discouraged from listing homes because the market's been so slow this year. So Zillow is thinking, oh, that might cause a floor on prices going down. But I think we're still going to see values drop in a lot of different markets, everyone. The demand is just too low. The inventory keeps growing in a lot of different areas. Let's actually get into some of your requests now, everyone. So I want to keep this moving, everyone. What are the cities that you want me to cover here in this video? Feel free to shout it out loud. Feel free to say it in the comments section. There's a place called Hurricane, Utah. Did you guys know that? Kurt wants me to look up Hurricane, Utah. I believe that's near St. George. Is that right? Hurricane, Utah. How about, I know some of you guys were actually requesting here. We have Ahmed saying, my father, who's a physician, bought over a dozen properties in cash in 2010, convinced him to sell all in late 2023, 2024. Best decision ever. Great time to sell, 2023, 2024. Congrats, Ahmed. Especially if you're in a market like Florida or Texas. Here's an interesting one. Can you check why El Paso, Texas prices are not dropping? Yes, let's check El Paso, Texas, because not all parts of Texas are going down, everyone. Let's see. So Texas on a year-over-year basis, Texas is down 2.4% here, looking at the data on Reventure App. Texas is down 2.4%. But what about El Paso? Do you guys know where El Paso is? Could you spot it here on this map? Well, it's in the very left part of Texas, and the commenter is correct. Values in El Paso are still up 0.7% in the last year. Now, this is right on the border with Mexico. I have some friends who actually work in industrial properties. They're saying El Paso is booming. They're saying there's a lot of industrial properties, logistics centers getting built in El Paso. Maybe something to do with like onshoring of labor, onshoring of manufacturing is benefiting El Paso. I wouldn't say this market's strong, though. I mean, plus 0.7% is not like great. You could see it's decelerated, but it hasn't gone negative yet. We think it's going to go negative in the next 12 months. So our 12-month forecast for El Paso is minus 1.6%. Interestingly, you can see this as a market that doesn't really go down. Like its biggest downturn in any year was 3.2% in 2009. So this is a market that didn't crash in the last bubble. It's still really affordable to buy a house in El Paso. Typical home value, $224,000. So I think this market will start to go down a bit next year. Unlikely that El Paso crashes. Let's see, what other areas would you guys like me to check out? We got a lot of Texas here in the comments section. We got Bee Cave, Texas. We got Bernie, Texas. We got North Las Vegas. What other areas would you guys like me to check out? Well, actually, I'm gonna look at North Las Vegas, but I actually saw a really interesting article today, everyone. Apparently, employment growth in Vegas just went negative. So employment growth in the Las Vegas metro just went negative year over year in August. And every time that's happened, apparently, I haven't validated this, but every time that's happened in the last 30 years, there's been a U.S. recession. Every time Vegas employment growth has contracted, there's been a U.S. recession. There seems to be something about Vegas being a leading indicator for the economy since it's so service-based, since it's so based in tourism. What happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas. What happens in Vegas seems to spread all around the U.S. You could see in North Las Vegas, values are down 1.2% in the last 12 months. Down to 305,000. Where's it going to go in the next 12 months? Minus 3.7%. So we have, Vegas we think is a market at Reventure that we're kind of bearish on in the next 12 months. We have a lot of areas in Vegas we think are going to go down. The demand in Vegas is very low to buy right now. The inventory is up. And I want to talk about that inventory for a second, everyone, because I want to just slow it down. I want to slow it down here for a second and explain where we get these forecasts from at Reventure and why I feel so confident in forecasting prices. And it's because we look at the supply and demand in each market. We look at the metrics on inventory and price cuts and DOM, and I actually did some analysis today. We ran some numbers, and we found that there's one stat above all that is predicting prices. And this stat predicted prices, get this everyone, with a 65% R squared, 80% correlation coefficient over the last year. If you don't know what those numbers mean, you're going to see what they mean in a second in visual terms. I'm actually going to show you guys a new feature here on Reventure App also. We're going to go to home value growth. We're going to click a market like Dallas. Take a look at this, everyone. If you go here to the graph on Reventure and you hit a new feature called scatter plot, look at what happens. We changed the graph from being just the historical graph for that area to a scatter plot of all the different metro areas in the US. And if we set a minimum population here to a million people, and we change the data point to inventory surplus or deficit and add a trend line, what do you see, everyone? You could see that there's a really strong correlation between home values growing in the last year. And I'm just going to zoom in on this for you folks so you can really see what's going on here, because this is kind of amazing. Home value growth over the last year versus the inventory surplus or deficit on the y-axis. And you can see that the more of an inventory surplus we have in these different markets, values are dropping, like in Dallas. Values are down 3.7% in the last year. Why? There's a 53% inventory surplus. Conversely, if we go to Chicago, if we go to Hartford, if we go to New York, there's still an inventory deficit and values are going up. And it's an 80% correlation, 64% R squared. I should say it's a minus 80% correlation, 64% R squared. This one data point, inventory surplus or deficit, is explaining to you what's going on with prices. We've cracked the code on prices and predicting prices here at Reventure in this housing cycle. What do you need to do? You need to look at the inventory surplus and deficit for your market. And this is really exciting, everyone, because people talk to me all the time. I run into people here in Nashville. I talk to people back in Florida. I talk to people in Texas and California. And they say, Nick, should I buy now? Should I wait? Like, what's going to happen with prices? And they give all these narratives. They talk about like the US dollar. The US dollar collapsing is like a thing I hear all the time now. They talk about, in their city, they talk about like, is there like a big company moving there? I'm going to say, folks, none of that matters. Look at the inventory surplus. That's predicting prices in this market. The more supply there is, the more downward pressure there is on prices. The less supply there is, the more upward pressure there is on prices. And no doubt, values are still going up in half of the US. This is not a national housing market downturn right now. This is a Sunbelt and West Coast housing market downturn. In the Northeast, in the Midwest, there's still bidding wars. In fact, someone just emailed me, a Reventure App user, and they canceled their plan because they just bought a house. So they used it to look at the data. They just bought a house, and they said that they're in the Midwest and they bought a house and there was 5 offers when they bought the house in the Midwest. And they said they begrudgingly bought the house, right? Because they needed to buy the house. But like in certain parts of the US where the inventory is low, there's still bidding wars. So I just want you guys to like think about this, right? Like to answer the question of where values are going, look at inventory, right? And then we take that inventory surplus and deficit data point and Reventure and we put it in our forecast. That's one of the main data points in our forecast, right? So that's where we're getting our forecast from, right? Is the inventory surplus and deficit and some of the other data points on price cuts and DOM. I just needed to explain that to you all so you could have that foundation for why you can trust these forecasts and where we're getting this data from. Let's get into more requests in the meantime, everyone. What other areas would you like me to cover? I know we had some super chats. I don't want to miss those super chats here. I'm trying to scroll back. The chat, folks, is really, really busy today. Let's see. All right. What other areas here would you guys like me to cover? Oh, we have an interesting one here. This is interesting. Fall River, Massachusetts is a request. We got Fall River, Massachusetts. We got, oh, this is a really interesting one, everyone. Have you ever compared any of your data sets with data maps from comprehensive studies that look to predict increases in climate-related disasters in the next decade? Is climate shifting going to start to cause home prices to shift, right? Like Florida benefited for so long, right, from inbound migration. Like, is Florida going to experience more hurricanes? Are people going to leave? Is California going to have more wildfires? Are people going to leave? Is the Midwest going to become like a safe haven from climate change? Believe it or not, in upstate New York, where I'm from, I talk to people looking at open houses there, and there's people moving to Albany, New York, because they think it's a safe haven from climate change. You can agree with that, you can disagree with that, but I'm here reporting you, telling you that people are actually doing that. So, I mean, I think we would probably see some benefit to the Northeast and Midwest, since those areas are more viewed as like stable in terms of climate. We just got a super chat coming in. Zip code 63021. 63021. Where is 63021, everyone? 63021. What? Manchester, Missouri. All right. Manchester, Missouri. Well, so that's west of St. Louis. And St. Louis is really interesting, everyone. Take a look at this. Talk about a bifurcated housing market. In and around downtown St. Louis and East St. Louis, values are plummeting. In East St. Louis, they're down 16%. In downtown St. Louis, they're down 9%. We have double-digit price declines near downtown St. Louis, but then in some of the nicer suburbs to the west, values are still going up. This is why it's so important for you guys to actually look at this data by zip code, because looking at national statistics, looking even at data for Metro St. Louis isn't going to really tell you what's happening. Manchester, St. Louis is up 2.9% in the last 12 months. Let's just zoom out a bit here. What's our 12-month forecast? Oh boy, biggest forecast so far of the live stream, plus 4.6% in Manchester, St. Louis. So we think prices here. Who made this request? Alex, we think prices here in Manchester, St. Louis, they're going to go up 4.6% over the next 12 months. Why is that? Well, let's look at inventory, everyone. Do we have inventory? Not really. We have a little bit of a bounce back in inventory, but it's still down a lot from before the pandemic. We're not seeing the price cuts yet. We're not seeing the days on market in St. Louis, in Manchester to the west of St. Louis. We got another super chat request, everyone. How about Brownsville, Texas? I feel like I talked about Brownsville not too long ago. We're getting a lot of Texas border requests, everyone. We're getting a lot of Texas requests today in general. Brownsville, so it's very interesting. We looked at El Paso, which was to the northwest on the border. Now we're looking at Brownsville, basically as far south in America as you can go. What's going on in Brownsville? This is where I think SpaceX has like some of their stuff going on. Well, prices are flat year over year in Brownsville. Typical value of $199,000. I'm actually going to show you guys just how cheap some of these houses in Brownsville, Texas are, because it's actually wild. Like the incomes here are pretty low. I've actually never been to Brownsville, but we got, SpaceX, we got some other stuff going on. Yeah, let's see. If you were to go and buy a house in Brownsville, I guess some of these actually aren't as cheap as I thought they would be here on Zillow. I mean, this is still pretty cheap. 3-bed, 3-bath. 1,800 square feet for $218,000, $122 a foot. I mean, if you're looking for a bargain, maybe you go to the Texas border. You can still find cheap prices at the Texas border. And maybe SpaceX is hiring down there. I don't know. $215,000 in Brownsville for a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,600 square feet, $130 a foot. Let's see. What other requests do we have, everyone? We got Brownsville. Where else do we got? Oh, Sutton, New Hampshire. Now, here's an interesting data point, everyone, which I'm sure a lot of people don't know. What is the state in America where values have gone up the most the last 5 years? We have a data point here on Reventure App, 5-year home value growth. Home value growth over 5 years, not just in the short term, but also in the long term. Where have prices gone up the most in the last 5 years? Do you know where? It's New Hampshire. New Hampshire has the best appreciation over the last 5 years, 62%. Hottest housing market in America is New Hampshire. Why is that? Well, a lot of people moved up from Boston during the pandemic. New Hampshire also has it's no income tax and no sales tax in New Hampshire. But they have very high property taxes, but no income and no sales tax. That's also why a lot of people move there. So this is still kind of a hot market. We'll see, though, if the area that was requested is a hot market. Sutton, New Hampshire. Can't say I have heard of Sutton, New Hampshire before. Let's see, is it even popping up here on the search? This would be interesting if it didn't pop up on the search. Sutton, Massachusetts, Sutton, New Hampshire. Where is Sutton, New Hampshire? Can the person who requested that give me the zip code one more time? And I'm going to move on to some other requests here in the meantime. Let's see. What other areas, everyone? What other areas? Stay in New York. Okay, let's see. What are you guys thinking? Quincy, Illinois, Parrish, Florida, Camillus, New York, New Jersey, Collierville, Tennessee. Oh, we got an interesting array of requests. And then we got a lot. Okay. You don't need to spam for Rhode Island that much. Westerville, Ohio, Phoenix. So many New Yorkers and Jersey people are moving to the Carolinas and Floridas. That's true. What about 33710? 33710. That sounds like a Florida. That sounds like a Florida one, everyone. 33710. Oh, I know where this is. This is close to where I used to live in St. Petersburg. What's going on in this market? On the west side of Pinellas County, everyone, values are down 6.6% in the last 12 months. Whew, big declines. Again, people are trying to say home prices aren't dropping. No, yes, they are dropping in a lot of different areas in America. 6.6% drop in the last 12 months here, west side of Pinellas County. What's our 12-month forecast? Oh boy, folks, minus 10%. On the west side of Pinellas County, near St. Petersburg, Clearwater, we're forecasting minus 10% over the next 12 months. If we shift to scatterplot view here, everyone, this is a new feature we have on Reventure App. Shift to scatterplot view, you can see how the inventory surplus is driving the home value growth. Once again, you can see even at the zip code level, we have a strong correlation even within Pinellas County, zip code by zip code, showing how prices are moving. Folks, this is a really helpful tool, this scatterplot tool we just added to Reventure.app. You're definitely going to want to go to www.reventure.app at the end of this video and use the scatterplot tool. Look at all the different zip codes in your area, metros across the country, different states, and see how they compare on different data points. Really, really helpful tool for you guys. What's going on, Wyatt? Wyatt says, what up? Love this channel. Dale says, a 10% decline is nothing in a 100% inflated market. Well, I totally understand that, Dale. Prices went up too much during the pandemic. Prices went up way too much during the pandemic. And actually, I need to show you guys a news story today. This was a really interesting news story. I don't know if you guys saw this. U.S. new home sales jumped to more than a 3.5-year high in August. Economists dismiss the rise as a fluke. This is a story that just came out today that is very interesting and kind of cuts across the narrative that I've been telling you guys. I've been talking to you guys about how weak the home builders have been. But take a look at this. On the new home sales from July to August, they went up 20% according to the government data. The U.S. government is saying builders sold 20% more homes in August than July, but economists are dismissing it as a fluke. What's going on here, everyone? Well, I was actually looking at this on X earlier today, and a lot of the people kind of who are really in the know on the home building have talked about how the home builder survey from the government is very volatile month to month. We'll have to see if that new home sales increase lasts. But we also had like Lennar just report earnings that were really poor. So I'm not really buying this, folks, especially when, check this out. There's this other data point for home builders that I've been looking at. New buyer traffic. New buyer traffic for home builders. Sorry, Kara. Just give me another comment in the chat here about where you want me to look. New buyer traffic for builders is at its lowest level basically since the 2008 crash. So this is the National Association of Home Builders reporting buyer traffic. How many people are coming to builder sites? In September 2025, it's literally like at the lowest level since the period from 2007 to 2012. So we have very few people going to home builder sites to buy homes according to the builders. This is what the builders are telling the National Association of Home Builders. But we have the U.S. government suddenly reporting that builder sales spiked to a 3.5-year high. We'll have to see what that looks like in future months. I have a feeling that number might correct back down because the builders are struggling. The builders are having to cut prices a lot. The builders are having to cut prices a lot. What other requests, everyone? Apparently, I missed Kara's super chat twice. I apologize, everyone. It's hard to do these live streams and follow the chat and then also do the video. But feel free to leave the comment again, Kara. What other requests here? Angel Eyes says, 3 people are going in on rental house to survive, all elderly. Don't know what that means. 3 people are going in on a rental house to survive. Does that mean 3 people are splitting the cost of buying a house? because they can't. That's how they could afford it. Nerd says no need to look up Boston. It's never going down. I'm not gonna say Boston's never going down, but I think Boston's starting to slow. Prices there still are up year over year. How about St. George, Utah? Kurt Nash, St. George, Utah. What is going on in St. George, Utah, everyone? What's the Zillow data saying in St. George, Utah? Utah's an interesting market, everyone. This is a place where values are still up year over year, but I don't know for how long. In St. George here at the southwest part of the state, values are up 0.5% year over year. But at Reventure, we think they're going to drop 6.6% over the next 12 months. 6.6% decline over the next 12 months in St. George, Utah. The inventory's increased a lot. Folks, we have a super chat in Hawaii now. 96744. 96744 in Hawaii. Kanoe? Please correct my pronunciation if that's wrong. Kanoe, Hawaii. Values are down 2.8% in the last 12 months. It costs $1 million to buy a home here, folks. $1 million. I was telling you folks earlier about the $400,000. If you buy a $400,000 house, how much do you need to make? Well, to buy a house in this zip code in Hawaii, you need to make $250,000 at least. To buy a house in this zip code in Hawaii with a mortgage, it's down 2.8% in the last 12 months. In the next 12 months, we think it's going to go down 6.4%. Hawaii is actually a really interesting market. This is one that's really started to slow. You know, Hawaii is like California, really expensive prices. Our forecasts here at Reventure for Hawaii are really starting to get negative. Really starting to get negative here for Hawaii. Evan has an interesting comment. He says, every time I say bifurcated, take a shot. You know, it's true. It is a bifurcated market. Maybe there's another word we can come up with for bifurcated. I guess it would be varied market, or actually, I'm going to stick with bifurcated. I think it's a better word. Port St. Lucie. How about Port St. Lucie? Do you think Vegas will run out of water and land? That's a great question. I went to whatever the lake is near Vegas, Lake Mead. They seem to be pretty low on water in Lake Mead a year or two ago. But they seem to recycle the water in Vegas pretty well. I think like 50 or 60% of the water in Vegas is recycled. All right, Kara, sorry. I missed your super chats. She's back. 20194. 20194. Where is 20194? It feels like it's in the Northeast. Virginia. Reston, Virginia. Now, is this where Amazon's headquarters is? Reston, Virginia. 20194. I think it's close by. So you can see Washington, D.C. is here. Values in D.C. are going down pretty much everywhere. Values in D.C. are going up everywhere, or going down everywhere in D.C., I should say. But in Reston, Virginia, they are going up still. So we still have like upward pressure on prices here in Virginia. These are the wealthier suburbs. The question is, where are values heading the next 12 months? We actually think they're going to be pretty stable. Values are going to go up 1.4%, 4.1%, 3.8%. So, you know, I think if you're hoping for a crash in these wealthy Northern Virginia suburbs, I don't think it's going to happen. But we could see some weakness, especially the closer you get to Arlington. In Alexandria, there could be more weakness, but further out in Vienna and places like Reston, we actually think values here are going to be 4.3% up over the next year. Let's see, everyone. I mean, are you guys going to buy in the next 12 months? Like, how many of you are actually going to buy a house in the next 12 months? I'm starting to look to buy a house. Not that seriously, though. You know, I moved back to Nashville. I know I'm going to kind of stay in Nashville for the long term. Starting to get in the headspace of buying a house. Prices here are starting to drop, but the sellers are just still way too diluted in many cases. They're still way too diluted. They're not, you know, in Nashville, I think it's like 25% overvalued. We're forecasting a -7% drop the next 12 months. I think the big thing actually, I was talking to my friend about this. He's around 36, 37. I'm 35, and we were talking about like buying a house. And I was like, oh, you know, when are you going to buy a house? He's like, I guess when I get married. And I was like, yeah, I totally get that. And I think one thing people don't understand is that one thing people don't understand about home buyers, and especially like millennial generation and Gen Z, is millennial and Gen Z is not in any rush to buy a house. Like in general. Individually, some people might be, especially if they start families at a younger age. But in general, Millennial and Gen Z is waiting for family formation, prioritizing career, and then recognizes, I think, buying real estate is like not a great value right now because of how expensive it is. So there just isn't this like urge to buy. And I totally feel it when I talk to different people. I think a lot of people are like, yeah, I want to buy, but I'm in no rush, especially with rent being much cheaper, right? If rent is much cheaper, which it is much cheaper than buying right now, there's no financial push, right? And I hear people talk about like the scenario of like crazy inflation. You know, they say, well, we're going to have crazy inflation and like the dollar is going to lose all its value, they say. And as a result, home prices are going to have to go up. I was actually just talking to someone today about that. And the way I would position it for you guys, if you're thinking about like if you're worried about the value of the dollar, if you're worried about the value of the money in your bank account, right? And you don't want to get caught in some hyperinflation scenario and not owning a physical asset. The way to think about it is that we would need to see the inflation first show up in rent and wages. Like that's the only type of inflation that matters for the housing market. Rent and wage inflation. All this other stuff about like crypto and gold and like foreign exchange reserves and like it's not really relevant. What's relevant for the housing market is rent and income. Rent determines what an investor would be willing to pay for a house. Income determines what a home buyer would be willing and afford to pay for a house. And one way we just know that the market is in a bubble, right? One way we know that prices are in a bubble is by looking at the ratio of those two things together, right? Home value to income ratio. What's the home value to income ratio in your state? And how is it compared to the long-term average? So let's look at Tennessee. In Tennessee, the home value to income ratio today is 4.5. The long-term average is 3.8. So this indicates that Tennessee's in a bubble. The home values have gone up way more than incomes. So if you're a buyer in Tennessee, or you're a buyer in a market like Idaho, where the home value to income ratio is 5.7, but the long-term average is 4.7, understand that your market's already in a bubble and that like the only way inflation is going to matter is if it causes income and wages to go up enough to make it more affordable, right? So if income and wages go up enough, that can cause affordability to come back to the market. But income and wages generally take a while to go up. Today they're around it's like 3.5% wage gain in the last 12 months. And then we're also seeing, we have a metric here on Reventure App, rent to income ratio. The rent to income ratio, home value to rent. And that's like another one. Like if we just open up a market like Dallas, right? Home values are now trading for 14 times rents, annual rents. The long-term average is 12. So again, you know, you see home values trading above rents at much bigger than the long-term average. You feel more confident in saying that your market's in a bubble. You feel more confident in saying like, hey, something's not right. Prices here need to go down. And I think that's just like a really important thing to understand the fundamentals. We've talked a lot in this video about short-term forecasts. What's the 12-month forecast from Reventure? What's the 12-month forecast from Zillow? You need to know that, especially if you're buying soon. But also understand, you know, take some time to understand the fundamentals. But this can really help ground you in knowing really what's going on underneath of your housing market. What's the home value to income ratio in your city and zip code today and compared to the long-term norm? And then what's the home value to rent ratio in your area today compared to the long-term norm? Because it's income and it's rents that ultimately determine home values over the long run. And that serves as the basis of our overvaluation metric on Reventure App as well. Let's get into some more requests, though, everyone, because I know you guys have some markets you really want me to look at. Mobile, Alabama. Whew. Alabama. Have you guys ever been to Alabama? Have you ever been to Mobile? I've been to Mobile once. 333-6608. Some of you don't know. I used to work in, well, I do work in real estate today, but I used to work for a company that did real estate deals all around the U.S. And we once flew into Mobile to look at a deal. Now, Mobile, 36608 in Mobile, Alabama. 336. Here we go. We got a really like big zip code here. Values are basically flat year over year in this zip code west of Mobile. Center of Mobile values are going down. Just to give you guys some perspective, Mobile is almost like right on the Gulf in southern Alabama. Where we think values are heading here in the next 12 months, we actually think it's flat. We think this market is actually flat over the next 12 months. Its inventory trends, its days on market trends are all showing that it's a market that's just not really going to be facing an imminent crash. It's a market that's not really going to be crashing much. It's slowing, but this is a stable market here in Mobile, Alabama. What about Petaluma, California? Petaluma, California. Where is Petaluma, California? I feel like watching this video is a geography lesson. I feel like I'm getting a geography lesson just by taking these requests. We should do a little geography quiz in a couple months, see if people's geography knowledge in the U.S. has improved. I used to be good at the state capitals. I'm not sure if I'm still as good as the state capitals as I used to be. Let's see. Petaluma, California. This is north of San Francisco in Santa Rosa Metro. Values are down 2.7% in the last 12 months. 2.7% decline in the last 12 months, down to 1.03 million. Where do we think it's going to go over the next 12 months? We think this is going to be roughly flat. So we think there has been a bit of a decline. We think there might be a little bit more of a decline going forward, but we don't have enough inventory and price cuts and DOM yet on the market to suggest that values here are going to really start to go into a free fall or that they're going to go down a lot. This is an interesting question. Can you speak to the subjective concept of 300,000 homes going for close to $1 million in the King County area? I can't imagine people will be able to stay afloat. So I think what this commenter is talking about is something a lot of you can relate to, is the fact that homes that would have been worth like 300,000 or 400,000 5 years ago, you see them listed on Zillow and they're listed for prices today that just make no sense. Now, King County is in Washington, and it's basically near Seattle, King County, Washington. Seattle's a housing market that's starting to slow. So you might see prices actually start to drop here in Seattle. I think they are already dropping. But, houses that were cheap previously are going for a lot of money. And, you can see if you just zoom in here, like what are you having to pay here if you're buying a house in King County? 3-bed, 2-bath, 2,000 square feet, Bellevue, $1.17 million. Ooh, who can afford this? That's a monthly payment of $10,000 a month. $10,000 a month monthly payment on that mortgage. Yep, they've cut the price 2.5%, but this is still really expensive. And here's what gets me, folks, about Seattle, about Portland, about Boise, Idaho, Salt Lake City, pretty much everyone on the West Coast, including California, is the cost to buy versus the cost to rent. So let's just look at this house. I'm going to do some analysis for you guys real quick here, but this is interesting. This house costs $10,000 a month to buy, according to Zillow. Now, a good question is, how much would a similar house cost to rent in the same area? Let's see. How much would a similar house cost to rent? Well, there's not a lot of actually houses for rent, but you can see here, folks, the rentals. Here's one for rent, $3,500 a month, $3,000 a month. Some of these aren't as nice, but still, like there's houses you can rent here in Bellevue. And I'm just going to isolate houses. We're not looking at apartments. Here's one, $5,000 a month. So you can rent a house maybe for $5,000 a month or $4,000 a month. To buy it, it would be $10,000 a month to buy a house like this. This is just like another way it's not totally sustainable, right? It's like if the cost to buy is double the cost to rent, then where's demand going to come from? Why are people going to buy? And ultimately, you're going to need to see the prices drop and or the rents go up. This goes back to what I talked about a second ago, like the home value to rent ratio is a key metric to help understand the market in your area, everyone. And ultimately, the Zillow value estimates, which is one of the best estimates of home values in the US, they're now going down in half the country. on a month-over-month basis. They're going down in 15 states. This is something a year ago everyone would have told you is impossible. A year ago, everyone said, no way would that happen. It's happening today. And in certain states and cities, it's becoming like a crash. We looked at zip codes today that are down double digits, that are forecast to go down double digits. And so, the good news here is home prices are getting more affordable in half the country. And if you are a home buyer who's been waiting and you're in these areas, now could be a good time to step into the market and start negotiating hard with buyers. We here at Reventure have several different metrics to help you all with that. We have our home price forecast. We have our overvaluation rate. We also have our long-term 5-year price growth. This is data that you guys need as a potential home buyer to make a more informed decision. So what I encourage you guys to do right now, go to www.reventure.app. Here's the homepage, and it's really simple. Just type in your zip code. Type in your zip code and take a look at the data on home values. What are home values trending over the last year? Well, you can see they're down 4.1% here in Austin, Texas, in this zip code I just looked at. Home values are down 4.1%. But where are they going the next 12 months? Check out our 1-year price forecast for your zip code to see. You can access all of that under a premium plan. The cost of a premium plan is $49 a month or $33 a month if you do the annual. Until next time, everyone.